use the dropdown. Excuse me. So if I were to go to any column in any list or library where there were options, where there were selections in it. So here I'm going to go to the category dropdown menu and go to column settings and then go to edit. What Bill was asking about earlier was this right here. So if you notice here, as I take my mouse and I put it on top of something like expenses, there is a little set of 6 dots to the left side of a selection. And what this is I want you to imagine like it's a handle. Okay, this is a little grid that's supposed to show you that you can click and drag this to a different position. So if, for example, approvals should go at the top of the list, what you do is you grab a hold of that grid right there and you drag it up, and approvals can go to the top of the list. So that was the little disconnect there that Bill was asking about before lunch. He was asking about why that, where that 6 dot little grid came from. And that's what it is. If you're hovering on top of a selection, it's a click and drag functionality between the different selections there. Looking good. All right, and pretty even distribution there. Looks like more than half of you are using your Outlook. Great. I will say this. I always used to tell people to use their Outlook tasks, and no matter how much I pushed for it, people really weren't using it so much. And I think what you're going to find here, for those of you who haven't really worked with To-Do and Planner yet, is that To-Do and Planner are a really great tag team for being able to use your Outlook tasks more directly. So let me talk through this for a moment. First of all, if I start up my desktop version of Outlook, some of you may have the old view of Outlook, and some of you may have the new view of Outlook. The new view of Outlook, as you can see from this little pop-up here, puts the different Outlook modules, as they say, over here on the left-hand side. And I want to point out to you, everybody, that in this version of Outlook, there is still a button. First of all, they moved it from the bottom left-hand corner. I just saw this morning somebody else on Twitter complaining that they moved this little toolbar that used to be in the bottom left-hand corner with the email and the calendar and stuff like that on it. And I'm right there with that. I don't like it over on the far left, but for whatever reason, Microsoft is enforcing this new position for your navigation inside of Outlook. Of course, the real reason is because they decided that's what the online version of Outlook should look like, so they just went ahead and gave us this one. Excuse me. But here, the interesting thing is that as we are modernizing inside of Outlook, they actually are introducing, in addition to the little clipboard with the check mark on it, also the blue check mark. So this is a direct integration of Microsoft To Do into the desktop version of Outlook. Now, take a moment with me, everybody, just stay exactly where you are. And notice that if I go to the online version of Outlook, so this is the online version of Outlook, everybody, you see that left-hand navigation bar is in the same area, but the left-hand navigation bar does not have the clipboard with the check mark on it. You see that? So they are gradually phasing out the idea that there is just an Outlook task in favor of the blue check mark that is Microsoft To Do. But the thing about Microsoft To Do is that it is directly linked and synchronized both with your Outlook and with Microsoft Planner. So if I click here on Microsoft To Do, and then over here on the desktop, I click on my desktop tasks, right? So you see right here, everybody, in my task list, there is this task that says generic training calendar for scheduling emails. But also in this online app called Microsoft To Do, there are various tasks, and one of those tasks is, where is it? I saw it on that right-hand panel. Where is it? Generic, generic, generic. There it is. So you can see here that Microsoft To Do is basically the cloud version of Outlook tasks. It's the modernized version of Outlook tasks. If you were to come over here to Outlook and make a new task, this is a new task. Is it synced, right? And I say that the due date is the 20th, and I save it. This new task that's due tomorrow is currently visible in my task list in Outlook. And over here on Microsoft To Do, it won't take very long before, here's earlier, here's later. This will synchronize here in just a moment or two. Let's see if I can give it a nudge. I'll hit the send receive here, see if it updates a little faster. But this task right here should sync to the online location and go from there. Sooner or later. Come on, anytime now. The other direction also works here, everybody. If I go to Microsoft To Do Online and I click here to add a new task and I say, this is an online task through Microsoft To Do, and I set the due date as tomorrow and I click to add it. There we go. So this is a new task. Is it synced? Did actually get synced from my desktop. And the online task that's created through Microsoft To Do should, there it is, get synced as well. So Microsoft To Do is taking your local Outlook tasks and synchronizing them to the cloud. That is one thing that it is doing. Does everybody feel like they've got a handle on what the purpose of Microsoft To Do is so far, in terms of the tasks that you put into Outlook are now also available online, and it's through this new interface called Microsoft To Do? Does that feel good to everybody? Now, the other part of it is the non-individual part or group part. So in the same way, it's a good question, Johnny. So everybody, the question from Johnny is, are there instructions on how to migrate from desktop Outlook to online Outlook? On the first level, everybody, if you have Microsoft 365, all you have to do is go to the website office.com, click the waffle icon right up here in the top left-hand corner, and the very first entry is Microsoft Outlook here. And then when it comes to the functionality, I'll see if I can run down some good descriptions on, here's this that's different, that's different, those sorts of things. But basically anything that shows up here also shows up in your desktop version. There are a lot of people these days who have just simply decided that they're all only going to be online at all times. I still like the ability, for example, you can't do macros and things like that in the online version of Outlook. But if you'd like, feel free to, again, I'll just put my email address back out there. I can run down a bit of a description as to all the things that are different between them. But again, if you have Microsoft 365, you can always open the online version of Outlook and, dabble with it and get going with that from there. Okay, so we have the tasks on the desktop Outlook being synchronized to the online Microsoft To Do. That's working okay. Now here's the second part, everybody. The reason that Microsoft To Do is useful to me is because I like to use Microsoft Planner to schedule group-based task management. And here's the way that all works out. First of all, again, if we start from the website office.com and we click the 9-point grid button that's up in the top left-hand corner on office.com, amongst the other apps, you should be able to find Microsoft Planner. If you haven't used it before, what you'll want to do, it may not show up in this panel at first, but then when you go to all apps down at the bottom of the panel, you should be able to find Microsoft Planner in alphabetical order between People and Power Apps. So Microsoft Planner, if you click on all apps, will be in alphabetical order. And here's the information for you about Planner if you've never used it before. Microsoft Planner is intended to be used to help Microsoft 365 groups manage their group-based tasks. Meaning that whenever you create a new plan in Microsoft Planner, it has to be linked to a Microsoft 365 group. Now, the problem is they don't call it out as explicitly as they should. Let me show you what I mean by that. So over here on the left, if I want to make a new plan, right, I want to do some task management with me and the rest of my group. I click on New Plan, and it says, you want to make a blank plan. Do you have a project management plan? They actually just updated this. I was teaching a class yesterday and I was surprised by this because the week before it hadn't had this screen yet. So I'm just going to go with a simple blank plan. And when you click on blank plan, it asks you, what's the name of your plan? So I'm going to say this is the fiscal 23 budget approval tasks, right? And then right here, it says it is optional for you to add this to an existing group. But if you don't, then it will either make a new private group or a new public group. So everybody, don't let it do this, okay? I want you to think about this in the big picture. If you and a group of people need to be able to keep track of tasks together, the odds are very, very strong that you will already have thought of this in something like Teams and SharePoint. And so if you click on the Add to Existing Group dropdown, there should already be a Microsoft 365 group with the name of the team right here. So everybody see this? FY23 budget approval is a private group that I can link this plan to. And this is because earlier today, I made this team right here. This team called FY23 budget approval became, in the web browser, this Microsoft 365 group called FY23 budget approval. Don't use Planner without linking it directly to what you're already doing in Teams. Every once in a while, I suppose it is possible that you didn't think about using Teams before you start making a plan. But I would say just across the board, I always have a team in place for this thing that I'm creating tasks about. Does everybody feel like they see what I'm talking about here? Anybody have any concerns or questions? So I click on create, and here's the big idea. If you link this with the Microsoft 365 group, when you click on the members drop-down menu, this is the exact same set of members that are on your team and your SharePoint site, and you don't have to do any special management. Alicia, Amanda, Faye, Miguel, Neil, and Noah are all on this list already. And this means that these are the people that you're allowed to assign tasks to, because you have to be inside of this Microsoft 365 group in order to access these tasks and in order to move them around. So this is your area for this group of people to schedule tasks amongst themselves. At the top of the screen, you'll see that there is a listing called To Do, and then next to it, something that says Add New Bucket. So in Microsoft Planner, here's the way this works. They tried to use a Kanban board functionality. For those of you who've never heard of that terminology before, I want you to imagine this. You have a bunch of tasks on little cards, like on note cards or something like that. And to help you understand the status of your project, you're moving those tasks on the cards between different areas, and the different areas mean different things. So on a Kanban board, that sometimes is called a column. Here in Microsoft Planner, it's called a bucket. You can invent whatever buckets for categorization suit you. So for example, here are some ideas. My first bucket could be Q1 required tasks. My second bucket could be Q2 required tasks. And my third bucket could be additional tasks. And so as I work with my tasks, I might move these tasks between whether they're required in Q1 or Q2, or maybe they're just under the additional categorization. Another bucket strategy might be that over here, these are the departmental tasks, like IT tasks and HR tasks. And then you go over here and you say finance team tasks, right? And so you might create a task, make it under the finance team to begin with, and then move it under HR. Or another way to think of this could be required, nice to have, and shelved. So you can create buckets for your tasks that help you understand the tasks more thoroughly and help people visualize how things are going. I'm going to go ahead and rename these to be Q1 required, Q2 required, and shelved, and then possible tasks. Oops, tasks. So I've created buckets to put my tasks into, and then I've got this little button here that says add a new task, and I'll create task A. I'll create a due date for that task, and I'll assign it to one of my team members. And then task B, and a due date, and assign it to a team member. Q2 required, task C, add a due date, and assign it to a team member. Task D, set a due date, and assign it to a team member. Okay, so we now have tasks that all have due dates and people they're assigned to. But because of the buckets idea, I can now take task D out of the shelved tasks and put it into the Q2 required column, take the task E over here and move it to the Q1 required, take task B and move it over to shelved, and otherwise keep myself organized as far as the condition of things. I can also click on the individual tasks and fill out additional information, like when it should have started, whether it has a recurrence or repetition, and whether I want to do things like add attachments. Now up here under labeling, I just want to point out that each of the plans that you create can have different assignments for what these colors mean. So for example, you might go to green, use the little pencil over here on the right, and maybe these are financial tasks. Or you might click on the pencil for the purple categorization and say that that label means that it is a IT task. And then you can label task A as being financial and IT if you want it to be, for example. You can go to task D and say that that is also an IT task. Or you can go to task B and say that again, that is a financial task. So we can decide what these tasks are all about by moving them between buckets or by adding categories to them to help us more thoroughly understand what each task is about. And then the round trip of all of this is, you can see right here that this task is assigned to Neil. It's task D. It's under my FY23 budget approval tasks. Well, if Neil now goes to the waffle icon in the browser and clicks on to Microsoft To Do, Microsoft To Do is going to do the job of aggregating these tasks, and it's going to show me that task D, which is under the fiscal year 23 budget approval tasks, is due on May 19th. So earlier today, the question came up, are there benefits, are there advantages to using Microsoft To Do, to using Microsoft Planner, or to using a custom SharePoint list? And the point that I wanted to make to you is this: Microsoft To Do and Microsoft Planner are not highly customizable. And so there may be very easily several things that you would like to do to make a sophisticated task list that you aren't quite capable of in these systems. But on the flip side, Microsoft To Do and Microsoft Planner are beautifully integrated. Microsoft To Do shows me everything that's my responsibility across multiple plans, as well as my personal tasks. So while I let that set in here, let's go ahead and pop open our second poll question, which is, if you go into Microsoft Planner right now, and you were to think about the types of projects that you have going on, what kind of buckets might you decide to create based on who the people are, based on the phases of the project, based on impact, or literally any other categorization that might be useful? So while we get those poll questions in, how's everybody feeling about the interaction between Microsoft Planner and Microsoft To Do, and what the actual use case is for Microsoft Planner versus Microsoft To Do? All right. That one was really conversational in nature. So it's a pretty even distribution across the different possible bucket options. And so far, nobody's got any additional questions for me. So I'll go ahead and continue down the same path for a moment. So earlier today, I heard or I saw somebody mention using Microsoft To Do for their task lists. And I'd like to kind of round out some of the ideas that are possible here so that you can make conscious choices one way or another. So in Microsoft To Do, if you were to go to your My Day, for example, on the left-hand side. And again, you can find Microsoft To Do by clicking the waffle icon, that 9-point grid in the top left-hand corner. And then from the apps list, you can find To Do either on that first menu or by going under All Apps and then finding To Do. So when you get to your My Day, for example, under Microsoft To Do, you can click here and you can add a task. But when I add this task, so this is an example task, right? I can schedule it for a specific date. That's great. I can set an alarm for the day before if I like, maybe at 8 a.m. in the morning. And I can set it as recurring. But if you notice, everybody, I do not have any capacity here to assign this to another human being, okay? This is my task. It's assigned to me. There isn't a lot of sophistication here. Now, I'm going to go ahead and cancel that task. Over on the left-hand side, Microsoft has decided, and actually, I'm not even sure if it's Microsoft. To give you a little bit of background here, everybody, Microsoft To Do is actually the result of Microsoft purchasing another company. Microsoft To Do was somebody else's application. I don't even remember what it's called back then. But in the system here, if you wanted to have an area where you could collaborate and schedule tasks for other people, well, then you have this concept of the list on the left-hand side. So I'll make a new list and I will call this the Project Acadia task list. And now that I have the Project Acadia task list, you'll see that I can go up here to the top right-hand corner and share it directly with specific people. So I'll click here on Share Invitation Link, and I'll decide to add some new people. I'll decide to, oops, copy this link to everybody, and then sort of push this out, right? So invite via email, oops, or copy the link and email this to other people. But I want you to feel the friction that's here, okay? I'm making a new task list. I'm inviting maybe Amanda and Faye to this task list. What happens when Amanda and Faye aren't part of the team anymore? Well, now I need to bring on Noah and kick Faye out, right? But all of that is tied directly to this one task list that isn't otherwise tied to any meetings or files or anything else out there. So in my mind, at least, a task list that is shared with other people in Microsoft To Do has very, very limited functionality because it really is just about here are 4 or 5 tasks, and here are the couple of people that we've agreed all have these tasks. There aren't many different views of this task list. There aren't many different functionalities that you can use here. But on the other hand, when we are over here in Microsoft Planner, we can also create tasks for many other people. Thanks very much for that, Chris. Wunderlist is the company they bought. So this plan right here, the budget approval task plan, is tied directly to a team of people. It already has a membership that's being defined by Teams and SharePoint anyway. And what's more, I can click on one of these tasks here and notice what I can do with attachments. When I click on Add Attachment right here, it says, well, I happen to know for a fact that this plan is connected with a team, and that team could very easily have a whole bunch of files. Would you like it to go ahead and look through all the team files and decide what to attach to this so that Noah doesn't have to have another copy of this file? Noah can simply go over to the same copy everybody's working on. So here, when I click on Add Attachment and I click on From Team Files, I find out that I can go into the HR department folder. I can find that PowerPoint presentation and select it. And they say that I have attached this presentation to the task, but really what I've done is included a link to the presentation that is already accessible to Noah. Because remember, Noah is a part of the team. Noah is a part of the SharePoint site. Noah is a part of the plan because of the Microsoft 365 group across the board. So in my mind, at least, there really isn't any competition between the Microsoft To Do task list and the Microsoft Planner functionality for group-based task management. If you would like to assign tasks to other people, then Microsoft Planner is really the right way to go because it is so directly integrated back to Microsoft To Do for their personal tasks, but it is accessible to everybody on the team really easily. Does everybody see what I'm talking about when I go on this little bit of a yapping tour around Planner and To Do? Does anybody have any other questions or ideas here? And just to reiterate on what we were talking about before lunch. Before lunch, I said, I'm going to talk about this a little bit, but then we'll really revisit it after lunch because our poll questions are tied to Microsoft Planner after lunch. So let me show you really what I'm talking about here. So earlier today, I went to the budget approval team. And if I go to site contents, I created a work progress tracking list. Now, notice the things that are good about this list. In this list, I can invent categories, progress labels, priority labels. I can color code things. And I can really control on a deep level all the things that we know about these items. However, in Microsoft Planner, I have fewer points of customization. I can customize the buckets and I can customize these labels, but those are the two ways of really clearly understanding what these tasks are about. However, what I do have when I go to Microsoft Planner is, number one, the tasks that are assigned to me are automatically showing up in Microsoft To Do, and so it's easier to stay on top of them. And number two, look at all the different ways that we can view this list. Here we can click on Grid up at the top of the screen, and we have a simple task list version of how to see all of these, who they're assigned to, what their dates are, etc. We have the board view, which we looked at earlier. And in the board view, we can easily take task D and shuffle it from a required task about Q2 over here to possible tasks. We have the chart view where we can see how many tasks have not been started, how many are started, how many are late, and how many are completed. And we can have a schedule view to see when the different tasks need to get done. So this ability to flip between many different versions of how this list might be displayed is a really interesting piece of functionality. Okay. Great question here from Chris. Everybody go ahead and check the chat if you are not already looking at the chat. So if governmental projects are recurring, right? You have the same budget process, you have the same audit process. Could you copy this this plan? And everybody, the answer to this is not only yes, but I will tell you definitively, I personally don't have enough repetitive projects to where I've done this, but my wife late last year went into Microsoft Planner, made one template version of a plan, and then copied it like 65 times across different teams and projects. So let me show you how that would be done here, everybody. So I'm going to start over from scratch here for a moment. I'm going to click here on New Plan. I'm going to create let's do a project management plan here. Here we go. I'm going to call this one Annual Budget Template. There we go. And I'm going to tie this to the 2023 budget process. There we go. And then I'm going to click on Create. Now, when I do that, because I'm using one of these templated options, you can see that they've created buckets for initiating and planning and executing and monitoring and closing. And they've already created some of these tasks here. But I'll go ahead and add a few more. So here under initiating, I'll say stuff like distribute template budget workbooks. And I'll set a due date of the 27th there and add the task. Now, I want you to notice, everybody, at this stage in the process, I'm not going to assign it to a human being yet. Okay, they're not assigned to human beings yet. I'll just go over here to executing, and I'll say this is another like compile data, and I'll say that that's going to be in May. Great, and add the task. And then maybe here I'll do reviewing as one last bucket, and I'll say end of year review. Okay, so take a moment, everybody. Here, I started off with a templated plan. That was just so I'd have some more stuff on the screen. But you can see here that I'm able to make buckets, adjust buckets, make new tasks, move them around. And then here's what I can do. I can go to the ellipsis button right here next to schedule, and you'll notice that there is an option here for copy the plan. Copy the plan means make a new copy of it, and then you can put it into another team if you like. So here I'm going to click on copy plan. I'm going to call this one, let's call this FY24 annual budget template. And I'll put it, again, you see here all these groups. I'll put it into a different group here. I'll do my general manufacturing group. And if you notice, everybody, what is available to be copied over here? I can't copy the attachments. I can copy the priority levels, the dates, the descriptions, the checklists, and the labels. So I'm not allowed to copy who they're assigned to, and I'm not allowed to copy the attachments over because I'm putting it into a different group here. Let's see, if I were to pick the same group as before, then I could include the attachments. So I would have to reassign the tasks, but I'd be able to copy absolutely everything else about this plan over to the next year. How's that work for everybody? Does that make sense? Are there ideas or questions? So I can click copy plan here. And now if I go over here to the hub, I see that there is the annual budget template that has these elements in it. Let's see here. I've got way too many. Let's see. Oh, there it is. Plan copy successful. There it is. FY24 annual budget template. So there it is. I click on it, and then all I have to do is start reassigning these to other people. All right, looking good, everybody. So we've got about 10-ish minutes before we're going to take our next break. This is a great time to put up poll question number 3, which is based on what you've seen now, if you had to make a judgment call for what you're going to do for your tasks over the next quarter, is it Microsoft To Do because it's a little bit more personal? Is it Microsoft Planner because it's tied to the group and it's integrated into everything? Or is it to build a custom SharePoint list because you can invent all of your own labels and columns and everything else under the sun? You know, not a right or wrong answer here. This is actually one of those things that if you're a nerd like me, and you follow people who are in the Microsoft software space on Twitter and other places, this is the conversation point that people will often have. Somebody will put out there, you know, unpopular opinion, I actually like making a custom SharePoint list more than I like Microsoft Planner, and they'll run through the benefits of making their own custom SharePoint list. Now, on the other hand, I like the integration. I like the fact that it shows up in my Microsoft To Do. And so I can't really get away from using Planner and toward using that custom list because I think to myself, you know, I don't think my coworkers will stay on top of these tasks unless they're directly integrated with their own personal to-do lists. So there's something to be said for each of the different options there. Okay. Good deal. All right, so very close race between Microsoft To Do and Microsoft Planner, and a few of you are big time SharePoint users, custom SharePoint list. Glad to see it. Okay. All right, does anybody have any other residual questions so far about Planner, To Do, and custom lists? And while I'm waiting to see if anybody pops anything in the Q&A, let me go ahead and round out our understanding of Microsoft Planner as a whole. So again, the main concept here is the Microsoft Planner is a place where a group of people, a Microsoft 365 group, can handle all of their tasks. When you click on the Add Task button, you see a very small area where you say, I'm going to go Task A, I'm going to give it a due date, and I'm going to assign it to somebody. That's one piece of the puzzle. But then afterward, if you click right on that task, then it gives you access to all the other stuff about that task. So we talked earlier about labeling. So you see here that this template has the awaiting approval and awaiting review labels, but you could also invent your own labels here for anything that you feel like doing. You can assign it a progress level, but not very sophisticated. If you notice, everybody, in Outlook, you could say, oh, well, this task is 25% complete, or this task is 95% complete. You can't really do that here in Planner. They just say, have you started or not? Under the repeat functionality, I almost always, if I'm going to use the repeat functionality, go with the custom option down here, because this allows me to say, hey, I'd actually like to have it happen once a month, and I'd like to have it happen on the last Friday of the month, that sort of thing. So you see this custom repeating feature allows you to say the first Monday, the last Friday, whatever it happens to be for that particular task. You can add whatever notes you want to here about how the task is going and what people need to know. The checklist is kind of an interesting tool. So the checklist is intended to be quote unquote subtasks, right? So if we have task A, and let's say it's a big complicated task, we might say this is subtask 1A, and then subtask 2A, and then subtask 3A. And if you notice here, everybody, as I put things on the checklist, I can't be more specific about task 1A, but over here on the right, I can use this little up arrow. And so if I have this thing called that I call a subtask, I can promote it and turn it into a real task. So I can make subtask 2A so important that it would be assigned to somebody specifically. Notice that once I assign this to Alicia, and here I'll assign it to Alicia and to Miguel, right? So this is assigned to 2 people, but I cannot be specific down here. I can't say that subtask 2A is specifically assigned to Alicia, or subtask 1A is specifically assigned to Miguel. I could write it in here, but there's nothing for tagging, there's nothing for scheduling these, etc. If you want to be more specific about it, you need to use the up arrow in order to actually promote that into a real task. And then you'll notice here, everybody, that the subtasks within here automatically show up on the little card for the task itself, and you can either decide to include that or not. And again, here with add attachment, you could always upload attachments. That's still available to you. But I would say that if you are creating a plan for a group of people, they probably already have the documents they need in their team files. They just need to be brought to the right file in the right situation. And there it is. It's not attaching a new copy, but instead creating a link to the copy of the file that is in SharePoint right now. So then I can close this, and this task that's assigned to Miguel and to Alicia is due on February 6th, but it's also a recurring task. It's got 1 attachment on it. It's got 3 subtasks, of which none are completed. You can see here that they can click to complete one of them. So one of the subtasks is completed, etc. So this is the general concept of how these tasks are meant to be created and the kind of functionality that's built into them. And earlier, everybody, I pointed out that you could go to grid view to see more of a task list, board view for that shuffling, chart view, and schedule view. Now, on top of being able to switch to board view, you'll notice over here on the right that you can group it by who it's assigned to. You can group it by its progress. You can group it by its label. So for example, if I click here on labels, I can see that there is 1 task that's awaiting approval, and there are 3 tasks that are awaiting review. Then I can go back to grouping it by bucket. And then under the filters drop-down menu, you can say, hey, only show me those tasks that are assigned to Alicia, or only show me those tasks that are labeled as awaiting approval, or whatever kind of filter might be useful to me. So I'm going to click here on awaiting review. I see only the tasks that are awaiting review show up. I click back on it, and I'm back to seeing all the tasks again. All right, I'm going to pause here for a moment. Great question, Kelly. Absolutely. Let me come back to that in just a second. Other questions or ideas? Go ahead and populate the Q&A here. So to Kelly's question, is there a way to produce reports? There are two basic answers to this. The first basic answer is on the ellipse menu over here on the right, you have export the plan to Excel. So right there, relatively straightforward, right? Take all the data that's in this plan right now, drop it into an Excel spreadsheet, and then have at it, right? Just go nuts with it. So here I'll click on export plan to Excel so we can take a look at it. There's my file. Let me open it up. So this is what here we go. This is what a plan looks like. You know, you don't really need the task ID. I don't know. How many of you are typing in ID numbers to find your tasks? Probably not many. Okay. So besides the task ID, we have the name of the task. We have the bucket that the task is in. We have the progress level, the priority level, who it's assigned to, who created it, when they created it, etc. And you can see all the checklist items over here, those sorts of things. So for example, I could come in here. I'm going to go ahead and, whoops, let's see. Oh, I have to enable editing. There we go. All right, so I'll enable editing. And just to give you a simple example of what you might do as far as a report is concerned, you might go in here to insert a pivot table. You might then say, hey, I want to know based on the bucket, and then whether it's been, what its status is. Where's status? Completed, recurring, traded by, assigned to, well, progress, duh. Sorry about that. Progress, there we go. And then, you know, something like count them. So there are 1 closing task, 3 executing tasks, 3 initiating tasks, etc. And then, you know, you can figure it out from that point in the process. So exporting the details to Excel and then building a report from it. And then everybody, something we're going to be getting into in the last part of today's class is something like Power Automate. And what Power Automate can do is create a summary email and forward that summary email to the appropriate folks. So that's what we'll talk about later this afternoon. We are coming up on 10 till the hour. Does anybody need anything else before we close down for our break? Once going twice.